Hi ladies, we live in an age that worships honesty, transparency, and therapeutic dialogue. And yet, some things are better left unsaid, not because you're being dishonest, but because you're being wise. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't always mean speaking your mind. Sometimes, it means knowing when silence protects both your peace and the relationship you're trying to build. So, what exactly should a woman not tell her man? Here are 10 subjects even the most open-hearted woman should think twice about bringing up, especially if she wants her relationship to last. The details of past relationships. There's a subtle kind of vulnerability that women often step into in relationships, a desire to be seen fully, flaws and all, and still be chosen. That desire can manifest as oversharing, recounting your romantic past, breaking down your emotional timelines, naming names, dissecting what went wrong, what went right, and what could have been. But here's the truth. Just because a man says he wants to know everything about you doesn't mean he actually should. When you open up about your exes, you may be trying to demonstrate transparency, even a sort of emotional intimacy. Look how much I trust you. But that vulnerability can come at a price. Many men, even those with evolved emotional vocabularies, are wired to view a woman's past with possessiveness. Not necessarily out of toxic masculinity, but out of something quieter, something rooted in the male psyche: protection, competition, a fear of comparison. And when you give him too clear a window into your past loves, your past lovers, your previous heartbreaks or betrayals, it creates images he can't unsee, even if he wants to. Imagine he's hearing about the man who used to kiss you on your birthday. The one who took you to Paris. The one who broke your heart so badly you thought you'd never love again. He may listen quietly, but in his mind, he's building silent altars to those men, not out of reverence, but out of wariness. He wonders, did she love him more deeply? Will she compare me to him? Am I just another name on a growing list of chapters she'll someday tell someone else about? And here's the bigger risk. Sometimes, talking about your past too freely doesn't make you look honest. It makes you seem emotionally scattered, or worse, stuck. It makes him question whether you've truly closed that door, or if he's just another character in a story you haven't finished writing yet. This isn't about shame. Your past made you who you are. You don't need to hide your growth, your resilience, or your romantic history. But growth doesn't always need a narrator. And healing doesn't always need an audience. When you choose not to relive the details of your past loves with your current one, you're not being dishonest, you're being wise. You're guarding the sacredness of your now. You're choosing to protect the garden of your current connection from the weeds of memory. So next time you feel the urge to tell him about your ex, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing to connect or to unload? Does this story serve our intimacy, or does it serve my nostalgia? The past is a powerful teacher, but it's also a jealous one. If you let it into your current relationship too often, it'll ask for more and more of your present. Let him fall in love with who you are now, not with the footnotes of who you used to be. The number of partners you've had. It's a deceptively simple question, often wrapped in playful curiosity or late night, let's talk about everything, energy. How many people have you been with? He might ask, maybe even with a smirk or a laugh, trying to seem casual. And yet, beneath that question lies a minefield of emotional complexity. Numbers trigger comparison. In men, especially, you might believe that sharing your number is a form of openness, a way of saying, I have nothing to hide. But often, the reaction you receive has nothing to do with the number itself, and everything to do with what he thinks it means. For some men, even a single-digit number can cause internal panic. Who were they? Were they better than me? Did they make her feel things I can't? And when that number climbs, even modestly, the stakes rise. Suddenly, you're not just someone he loves. You're someone with a past he can't control, can't erase, and, worst of all, can't compete with. Because let's be honest, for some men, especially those who equate sex with status or conquest, a woman's experience feels threatening. Not logically, psychologically, emotionally. But here's the deeper issue. Once you tell him that number, it becomes fixed in his mind like a brand. It may color every disagreement, every quiet moment, every touch. Not because he's judging you out loud, but because he's judging himself. Your number can become a mirror he holds up against his own insecurities. Suddenly, he might wonder if he's just another in the list. Or worse, he might resent your sexual autonomy, even if he's had more partners than you. The double standard is real, and it's deeply rooted. Even the most progressive men, the ones who say, "It doesn't matter," may find themselves spiraling. And once the thoughts begin, they rarely end. Every time you hesitate in bed, he may wonder if you're bored. Every time you suggest something new, he may suspect it's something you picked up from someone else. Even if none of this is true. Let me be clear, your number doesn't define your worth. It never has, it never will. But in a romantic relationship, not everything needs to be measured, weighed, or disclosed. You are more than a body. You are energy, presence, intention, love. And the sum of your romantic experiences is not a confession to be made. It's wisdom you carry quietly, in how you touch, how you know what you want, how you understand nuance, pleasure, depth. If he demands your number, or if you feel pressured to give it, pause. Ask yourself, what's the purpose of this question? What will change after I answer it? If the number strengthens your connection, it will do so through trust, not tally. And if it weakens the connection, then it was never strong to begin with. So instead of answering directly, consider saying this: what matters is who I chose today. You, and I'm not looking backward. Let that be enough. Let your presence speak louder than any digits ever could. Your doubts about his ambition or success. You see him, really see him, in a way no one else does. Maybe that's part of why you fell for him in the first place. His potential, his intelligence, that inner fire he sometimes hides under layers of sarcasm, humility, or even self-doubt. You believe in the version of him that hasn't fully bloomed yet. And because you care, it feels natural, even loving, to want to help him reach that next level. But here's the quiet danger. When you start to vocalize your doubts about where he is now, even under the banner of motivation or encouragement, it rarely lands the way you think it will. Telling a man that he could be doing more, even if it's true, doesn't feel like support, it feels like judgment. Not because you're wrong, but because the subtext is loud. You're not enough for me right now. Men, especially those still defining their path, often carry a deep, unspoken sensitivity about their status, purpose, and achievements. In a world where masculinity is still too often measured by money, career, or external success, even a well-meaning comment from the woman he loves can pierce like a blade. Not all wounds bleed, but they linger. You may be thinking, but I just want him to grow. I want better for him. And that's valid, but growth isn't something you can force on someone else, especially not through criticism disguised as vision. The moment you try to become his life coach, something shifts. The romantic polarity, the balance of support and attraction, begins to fade. He starts to feel like a project instead of a partner. And no man wants to sleep with his supervisor. What works better? Quiet belief, strategic silence, letting him see, in your eyes and your actions, that you already view him as capable, not just someday, but right now. When you stop trying to push him forward, you create space for him to step into his strength on his own terms. And when he does, he won't just feel successful, he'll feel seen. This doesn't mean you can't challenge him. But timing, tone, and emotional awareness matter. Instead of saying, "You could be doing more," try, "I admire how deeply you care about your work. I know that when the time's right, you'll make the moves that matter." Instead of, "Why haven't you done this yet?" try, "I can't wait to see where your talent takes you." Support doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the most powerful message is silent, consistent faith. You're not there to fix him. You're there to remind him that he's already enough, and that his growth is something he gets to claim, not something you hand him with a checklist. In love, trust is not just about fidelity. It's about trusting someone's process, even when it's slower than you'd like. And sometimes, the most generous thing you can give a man is the space to grow without feeling like he's disappointing you every step of the way. Comparisons to other men, especially his friends. It can happen innocently enough. You're at dinner, talking about work, and casually mention that your boyfriend's friend just landed a huge promotion. Or you admire the way someone's husband planned an elaborate birthday surprise. Maybe you're even just venting, thinking out loud, trying to make a point about ambition, romance, or communication. But what he hears isn't just a story. It's a dagger, wrapped in velvet. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to poison a man's heart, even if your words come from a good place. Because whether you realize it or not, the moment you bring up another man, especially one he knows, as a benchmark for what he should be doing, you activate one of the deepest fears men carry. I'm not enough. I'm not winning in her eyes. I'm falling behind. It doesn't matter if your intention was harmless. It doesn't matter if you framed it as a joke or observation. What he hears is this: she's watching other men. She's measuring me. She's disappointed. And when that seed is planted, it grows into insecurity, resentment, defensiveness, sometimes even withdrawal. He may not fight you on it directly. He may laugh it off. But a quiet rift forms. One you might not see until weeks or months later, when the emotional intimacy has started to erode. Men want to feel like they're winning in the eyes of the woman they love. Not because of pride, but because for so many of them, romantic partnership is where they seek their deepest validation. If the world beats them down, they look to their woman for restoration, for that look in her eyes that says, "You're my hero. I trust you. I choose you." When that look fades, and is replaced with side-eye comparisons to their friends, colleagues, or exes, it hits different. It doesn't motivate, it emasculates. And the irony? The man you're comparing him to, Mark with the promotion, Jason who brought his wife flowers, Chris who ran a marathon, probably has flaws you can't see. Private struggles, hidden weaknesses. But when you highlight only the polished version, your partner doesn't just feel judged, he feels invisible. This doesn't mean you should lower your standards. Not at all. If your needs aren't being met, that deserves real conversation. But frame it in terms of you, not other men. Instead of, "Why can't you be more like," say, "Here's something I really desire in our relationship." Own your longing, not someone else's accomplishments. And if you ever feel tempted to compare out of frustration, pause. Ask yourself, is this about him, or about me feeling unseen, unheard, or unmet in some way? Because often, comparison is a symptom of unmet emotional needs, and it's easier to point to someone else than to sit with that vulnerability. In the end, he doesn't need to be like Mark, or Jason, or your best friend's perfect fiancé. He needs to be the best version of himself, and he needs to feel like that's good enough for you. If you want him to rise, don't drag him with comparisons. Build him with belief, reflect back his unique strengths, admire his individuality, and let him know, every day, that he's the one you choose, not just by default, but by desire. Your negative opinion of his family. Let's be honest, falling in love with a man doesn't mean you automatically fall in love with everyone who shares his DNA. His mother might be passive-aggressive, overly involved, or clingy in ways that make you question if he ever truly cut the cord. His sister might treat you like a stranger in your own relationship, offering cool smiles and backhanded compliments that sting more than open insults ever could. And the extended family? Sometimes they come with drama, emotional manipulation, or expectations that make your skin crawl. It's natural to have opinions. But here's the hard truth. Voicing them directly, especially to him, rarely ends the way you hope. Because when you criticize his family, you're not just talking about them. You're talking about the people who raised him, shaped him, molded the language of love he now speaks. Whether he had a perfect childhood or a complicated one, his family is a part of his internal wiring. And when you insult them, even gently, it can feel like you're criticizing him by proxy. It's not just about his mom's guilt trips or his brother's weird boundary issues. It becomes, "So, you don't like where I come from? You don't accept the people I love, or the people who love me?" And here's where it gets even more delicate. When you openly complain about his family, you don't just put yourself at odds with them, you put him in an impossible position. He's forced to choose between defending you and defending them. That's not fair. And over time, being asked to walk that emotional tightrope can make him resentful, exhausted, or even defensive toward you, even if he secretly agrees with everything you're saying. So, what's the alternative? Boundaries, yes. Silence, sometimes. Grace, always. You can absolutely protect your peace without making him feel like he has to protect his family from you. You can decline the holiday visit. You can set limits on how often his mom drops by unannounced. You can even say no without turning it into a war. When you need to vent, do it with a therapist or a trusted friend, not in bed beside him. When you're hurt, address the behavior, not the person. Instead of, your sister is a narcissist, say, it hurt when she dismissed me in front of everyone. I need you to have my back in those moments. That's not a critique of his bloodline. That's a vulnerable request from his partner. In relationships, there's a sacred power in knowing when to speak, and when to stay quiet. You don't have to love his family. You don't even have to like them. But if you love him, protect the parts of him that are tied to them. You don't have to pretend. But you can be kind. You can be strategic. You can be the woman who sets boundaries without burning bridges. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say nothing at all. Your secret stash or financial independence. Let's start here. It's not only okay, it's smart to have your own money. Whether it's a savings account, an emergency fund, or simply a small, just-in-case, stash tucked away for peace of mind, financial independence is a form of self-respect. It's not about secrets, it's about sovereignty. Because in a world where women are still taught to rely, depend, and wait to be provided for, having your own money is a quiet revolution. But, and this matters, just because you're entitled to your financial autonomy doesn't mean it needs to be a conversation centerpiece. Especially in a relationship where the dynamic isn't built on radical transparency or deep mutual understanding around money. Because while men are often raised to see money as a tool, they're also taught to see it as a measure of their worth. Their ability to earn, provide, and protect becomes deeply woven into their identity. And if they sense that you don't need them financially, especially if you talk about it casually, proudly, or too often, it can trigger an old, unspoken fear. If she doesn't need me, does she even really want me? This has nothing to do with you being wrong for having financial independence. It has everything to do with how delicate the male ego can be when it comes to perceived usefulness. If you lead with, I've got my own savings, I'm totally covered, even if your intent is to show strength, he might hear, you're optional. You're replaceable. I don't trust you to provide for me, even if that's not what you meant. Money, in relationships, often symbolizes more than currency. It symbolizes control, safety, power, vulnerability, trust. When a woman talks about her private accounts, side hustles, or investments, especially early in a relationship, it can create a quiet shift in energy. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because the dynamic moves from partnership to protectionism. From, we're building something together, to, I've already built something, and I'm not sure if you'll ever be allowed in. Now, that doesn't mean you need to hide your career, your ambition, or your intelligence. Those are beautiful parts of you. But sharing your financial independence is different than flaunting it. If you bring it up, do so gently, with context. Not as a flex, but as a foundation. Not as a threat, but as transparency. And only when the relationship has earned that level of honesty. If you're with a man who can't handle your success, your financial strength, or your independence, that's his work to do, not yours. But if you're with a man who can handle it, let him feel trusted. Let him feel needed in ways that aren't just financial. Let him provide something money can't buy: stability, protection, leadership, love. Because at the end of the day, the most powerful kind of independence isn't the kind you use to prove you don't need him. It's the kind you use to choose him freely, every day. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Your insecurities, raw and unfiltered. You're human. You carry scars, doubts, stories you've told yourself 1,000 times in the mirror. Maybe you worry about the soft curve of your stomach, the fine lines around your eyes, the fact that you haven't achieved what you thought you would by now. Maybe there's a quiet voice inside you that whispers, you're not enough, and some days that whisper becomes a roar. That's real, that's valid, but the man you love, even if he's kind, attentive, emotionally intelligent, is not always the place to unload the full weight of that inner noise. Because when you share your insecurities with him too early, too often, or too unfiltered, you change the emotional chemistry between you. You shift the dynamic from romance to rescue, from partnership to therapy. And most men, even the good ones, don't know what to do with that role. They'll try, they'll reassure, they'll say all the right things. But over time, if they're constantly asked to soothe what you haven't yet soothed within yourself, they may begin to feel helpless, drained, distant. Unprocessed insecurity is like emotional static. It fills the room with a sound that drowns out intimacy. And when you make him your mirror, asking him to validate you over and over, what you're really doing is outsourcing your self-worth. That's not love, that's dependency dressed in vulnerability. Of course, you can and should be real with your partner. But timing matters, so does intention. If you bring up your body image because you want connection, not comfort, that's different. If you share a fear because you're inviting him into your world, not asking him to carry it, that's intimacy. But if every touch comes with a warning, I know I look bad today, don't look at that part, I'm sorry I'm not in shape, then you're not letting him love you. You're handing him a filtered version shaped by your self-judgment, and asking him to pretend it's the truth. He didn't fall in love with a flawless woman. He fell in love with you. With your realness, your mess, your radiance, your complexity. When you constantly critique yourself in front of him, you teach him to question what he once accepted without hesitation. You invite him to doubt the things he already loved. Instead, do the inner work first. Sit with your insecurities alone. Write about them. Talk to a therapist. Cry if you need to. And when you come to him, come from a place of grounded honesty, not desperate searching. Say, some days I struggle with this, but I'm learning. That shows self-awareness. That invites partnership. That builds intimacy from the inside out. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. But you do need to believe, even just a little, that you are lovable. Let him hold your hand. Don't ask him to hold your identity. The not-so-pretty truth behind your beauty routine. There's a kind of everyday magic that women perform in silence. It happens in bathrooms, behind closed doors, in the early morning light or late at night when the world sleeps. It's the waxing, plucking, scrubbing, toning, tinting, and tweezing. It's the serums, the razors, the masks that make you look like a forest creature but promise to reveal a goddess underneath. It's the invisible labor that turns tired into luminous, ordinary into effortless. But here's the thing, he doesn't need to know all of that. Yes, he knows you're human. He knows you weren't born with contoured cheekbones or flawless brows. He gets that your eyelashes didn't grow in curled at a 45-degree angle. He's not delusional, but there's a difference between him knowing there's work involved and seeing the entire backstage crew in the lighting setup and the cables on the floor. Romance thrives on just a little illusion, not deception, mystery. When you start talking openly and often about every ingrown hair, every hormonal breakout, every hour spent shaving places he'll never see, you collapse the space between admiration and analysis. You invite him to look too closely, not because he's shallow, but because you've shattered the frame. You've turned the painting into a how-to manual. Suddenly, you're not a masterpiece. You're a process. And let's be clear, this isn't about maintaining a lie. This isn't about pretending to wake up like a Disney princess, effortlessly radiant and emotionally centered. It's about understanding that some aspects of beauty are meant to be felt, not explained. Some parts of your ritual are yours and yours alone. Sacred, quiet, powerful. Just because you're in love doesn't mean every detail must be shared. Oversharing your beauty routine can also send mixed messages. On the one hand, you want him to see you as natural. On the other, you're giving him a behind-the-scenes tour of all the ways you're fixing yourself. That tension is confusing, to him and to you. Instead of revealing your power, it can unintentionally expose your insecurity. What's more seductive, letting him admire your skin's softness without announcing you exfoliated for 15 minutes. Letting him touch your leg without saying, "Don't worry, I shaved this morning." Letting him smell your hair without hearing, "Ah, I used too much dry shampoo." Mystery is part of the magic. So let him wonder, let him enjoy, let him think some of it is just you. Because in truth, it is you. You are the woman who tends to herself, who works behind the scenes not because she's hiding, but because she knows her rituals are part of her power. He doesn't need a spreadsheet. He needs an experience. Let him stay in the glow of the finished product. Let him marvel, not measure. And let your beauty routine be exactly what it's meant to be, an intimate ritual between you and your reflection, not a report card for someone else's approval. The private dramas of your friends. He may be your confidant, your partner, your safe place, but he is not your girlfriend. And there's a reason that distinction matters, especially when it comes to the emotional chaos of your friends' lives. As tempting as it might be to share the latest story of your best friend's relationship drama, or how your coworker caught her fiancé texting his ex at midnight, or how your college roommate is spiraling again over her 5th breakup this year, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what am I actually hoping to get out of sharing this? Because often, it's not connection, it's emotional overflow. And it rarely lands the way you think it will. When you bring him your friend's private messes, you're not just telling a story, you're asking him to emotionally invest in people he didn't choose. People he likely has little context for. And while that might feel normal to you, because female friendship often thrives on shared emotional storytelling, to him, it can feel like background noise. Or worse, like psychological clutter. You might think he's being distant, cold, or unbothered. But the truth is, most men aren't wired to absorb and process the dramas of people they don't personally know or trust. He's not ignoring your words, he just doesn't see the value in carrying someone else's emotional weight, especially if it has nothing to do with your relationship. And over time, this dynamic can start to backfire. He might start to dread your catch-up sessions, assuming they'll be full of second-hand chaos. He may begin to tune out when you talk, not because he doesn't care about you, but because the stories feel repetitive, negative, and disconnected from the life you're building together. Even worse, he may start to see your inner circle, the women closest to you, as unstable, exhausting, or toxic, simply because all he ever hears are their lowest moments. That doesn't just color his opinion of them, it subtly shifts how he sees you too. After all, we become who we surround ourselves with. But there's another, even more serious layer, privacy. When your friend comes to you in pain, whether about a breakup, betrayal, health issue, or identity crisis, she's trusting you. Not you and your boyfriend. Just you. And when you share her story, even casually, you're breaking that trust in a way that feels small in the moment, but can carry long-term consequences. Because one day, your roles might reverse. You might be the one unraveling, and if he casually brings up your breakdown at a dinner party or shares it with his friends, you'll remember. Does this mean you should never mention your friends? Of course not, but share the essence, not the details. Mention that your friend is going through a tough time, but skip the specifics unless they're relevant to you personally. And if you do feel the urge to tell a story, ask yourself first, would she be okay with him knowing this? Would I want him to know if it were about me? If the answer is no, let it stay where it belongs, between girlfriends. Use discernment. Protect your friends the way you'd want to be protected. And remember, emotional intimacy with your partner is about sharing your world, not handing him a front row seat to everyone else's drama. Let him feel safe in your space, not like he's walking into an ongoing soap opera. Sometimes the strongest boundary you can draw in love is not between you and him, but between him and everyone who was never meant to be part of your relationship in the first place. Fantasies that don't include him. You're allowed to dream. In fact, you should dream of seeing the world, of writing your book on a windswept balcony in Italy, of launching your business, of hiking through the Andes with no cell reception, of living alone by the sea with only a dog, a journal, and a shelf full of fiction. These dreams aren't betrayals, they're expressions of your inner life. They're sacred proof that you are more than someone's partner. You are your own person, with desires, curiosities, and a future that's not yet written. But here's what you need to understand. Not every dream needs to be spoken out loud. Especially not the ones where he doesn't exist. There's a fine line between honesty and unnecessary exposure. When you tell your partner, even offhandedly, that you sometimes imagine a life where you're completely alone, or in a different city, or living a version of yourself that doesn't include him, you may be trying to express something innocent, a craving for space, independence, or self-discovery. But what he hears might be far more dangerous. I'm optional. I'm temporary. I'm not part of the story she wants to live. Even the most confident man, even the one who supports your independence, can be rattled by the idea that you're secretly picturing a life that erases him. Not because he's possessive, but because he's invested. He's imagining a future where you are the constant. He's thinking of homes, vacations, children, retirement. And then you casually mention that you sometimes fantasize about running away, starting over, or living a parallel life where you're completely free. To him, that doesn't sound like openness. It sounds like an emotional escape route you've already mapped. And the truth? Sometimes it is. Sometimes when we fantasize about lives that don't include our partner, it's because we're longing for parts of ourselves we've silenced in the relationship: freedom, solitude, novelty, autonomy. That's a signal to you, not to him. A cue to look inward and ask, what am I missing? Where am I shrinking? What do I need more of, or less of, in my real life so that I don't have to run away in my dreams? Because here's the quiet danger. When you make your partner aware that you dream of lives that exclude him, even if only occasionally, you plant a seed of uncertainty. He starts to wonder, is she here because she wants to be, or because she hasn't left yet? That uncertainty can take root and grow into distance, doubt, even defensiveness. And suddenly, the connection you once had starts to thin, not because anything has happened, but because you spoke too soon about something you hadn't even fully understood yet. Instead, protect your inner world. Let some dreams be yours alone, not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred. You don't need to narrate every fantasy. You don't need to confess every passing desire. Let your solitude live quietly beside your intimacy. Let your personal evolution happen without announcing it like a press release. If something inside you does need to change, your career, your routine, your freedom, then talk about that. But don't dress it up as a fantasy where he's absent and expect him to applaud your honesty. You can be a woman with dreams and devotion. You can crave adventure and still come home at night. You can hold multitudes, but not all of them are meant to be spoken. Some are meant to be felt, understood, and integrated. And only then, if they still feel true, shared. Let your imagination nourish you. But don't use it to starve your relationship of the security it needs to thrive. Why does this matter? Because intimacy isn't about dumping everything on the table. It's about choosing what belongs in the sacred space between two people, and what doesn't. A wise woman knows that being authentic doesn't mean being exposed. It means knowing the value of your silence, the power of timing, and the impact of your words. So speak less, but speak with intention. Let him discover your depth not because you handed him a map, but because he felt it, in the way you carry yourself, the things you protect, and the way you love. If this resonated with you, share it with a woman who needs the reminder. Save it, revisit it, and explore more of my writing, for those who want to be real, but not reckless. Loved, but not lost. Strong, and still soft.